So this video is an important one. This one is going to be about reading advice, not just following advice. So how can you tell if the advice you've been given by somebody is good advice for you or not? So how can you tell if the advice you've been given by somebody is good advice for you or not? And where do you get this advice anyway? Where do parents turn to learn other ways of handling situations that have caused them to maybe not always know what to do? Well, I'm going to tell you, a lot of the people I talk to, and myself included, we go to the internet. All right, we Google it. A lot of people do. And the next step then is trying to decide, is this a source that I can trust? All right. So there's so much parenting advice out there on social media, blogs, especially on Facebook. And then when you get into Facebook, if you're a caregiver who looks this stuff up like I am, you end up getting like more of it in your algorithms. And so I get these things like, ooh, spend $17.99 to buy this, or for $9.99 you can get this packet that's going to answer all your questions about how to parent your child, or you're going to never have your child lie to you again if you follow these simple steps. And then I go into these and I'm like, I think ChatGPT created the images, and I believe a bot created the entire thing. The voice is even of someone who's not a human. So I don't know if we should be trusting this or not. I'm going to go on a limb and say, let's really sort out our resources. All right. Many Facebook groups that are public are, and maybe they're something you have to join, but still, it's a lot of people giving each other advice. Someone puts up a question out there: who's ever dealt with this? Have you ever? My 8-year-old just blah blah blah, and then people start chiming in left and right, and I get into those comments and I start reading them, and I'm like, oh my goodness, there's just all kinds of advice. There's contradictory advice. There's things that don't make any sense. There's some things that do make great sense. And I also see some people really blaming and sort of shaming other people. So these aren't always well moderated. People are giving advice from their own experiences rather than research informed, trauma informed, actual accepted and professional advice in children's development and whatnot. Okay, so one of the most important parenting skills today isn't just following advice, it's discerning good advice from bad advice. Here's a few clues to consider. When you're reading things online, or when somebody in your life tells you how you should be raising your child, think about these things. Does their advice explain why the child might be behaving this way? Does it? Does it consider that? Does it protect the connection between the caregiver and the child? Is it taking the connection between the caregiver and the child into consideration? Does it balance accountability, which is important, with understanding? Is it helping the child understand why? And does it respect developmental differences? There are neurodevelopmental disorders that we're going to be talking about, like ADHD, autism, and other things like trauma, anxiety disorders. There's all kinds of things that come in that we need to be taking in consideration. Does this advice take that into consideration? If the answer is yes, then listen, and you might find out that it's a really great source, and there may be things you hadn't thought of before, and that's really fantastic. Okay, if the answer is, it sounds like shame or blame or just be stricter or take things away, whenever I hear take everything out of their room and leave not one thing in there, I'm like, let's not go there. If you hear things like, well, back in my day, this never would have been a thing, or if we could just, it's because of blah, blah, blah. And then we're looking at all the reasons why things aren't like they were in the old days. Well, were the old days really that great? Was it really, a great place? I mean, maybe in some cases. A lot of people have these idealized kind of almost fantasy of their past. And was it really that great? I mean, maybe. If it's about teaching a lesson, or how else are they going to learn if they don't, if it's something like that, then keep looking for more answers. I'll take your questions, and when I respond, what you'll get is experience-based, research-informed, that's grounded in attachment and nervous regulation theory. And I'll continue to come back here and add to these videos, and we're going to be talking about things like lying, stealing, sometimes crazy stealing, like there's no one else that could have taken it, or crazy lying, like that story absolutely couldn't have happened, but yet the child insists that it's the truth, and they just become so dysregulated because you're not believing them, but it's not believable. I like talking about kids that will just shut down, that are aggressive, that refuse in ways that are so frustrating. But what we'll be talking about here doesn't just give permission for them to keep doing that. It doesn't just excuse their behaviors. We're going to be working with understanding the need behind the behavior and helping the child make better choices uh, with a regulated adult. All right. Because when we understand what's beneath the behavior, the function behind the behavior, the need behind the behavior, we can then hold children accountable, we can preserve their dignity, and we can strengthen our connection with them. So another thing that gets really confusing sometimes is all the terminology. There's a lot of different things that are said online, and that you'll hear people give advice, and they'll be throwing out these words like authoritative, authoritarian, permissive, neglectful. And then you're going to hear a couple other words. Listen carefully. You're going to hear things like connection-focused parenting. You're going to hear things like low-demand parenting sometimes. And you might hear things about permissive parenting. And a lot of shame, blame, and so forth are getting thrown around, and it gets confusing. So these are very different approaches, but online they get mixed together. So connection-focused parenting is one of the things that I'm really advocating for. It is where the caregiver stays emotionally available to help their child. They are not the warden, they are the coach. They're also not the friend, they're not the buddy, but they are the coach who is there to help them make it through this situation that's really stressful. So there's this co-regulation piece that comes in that caregivers who are attuned need to try to do. It's not always easy, but that is the goal. You're going to hear, when you hear about pathological demand avoidance, which I'll talk about here in a second, you'll hear the idea of low demand parenting. And this is getting some real negative publicity in social media that I'm noticing anyway more recently. And low demand parenting isn't no demand parenting. What it is it's like lowering the bar. It's like lowering the bar temporarily while you're helping coach your child to use their nervous system to regulate, while you're co-regulating with them, while we will slowly raise our expectations, but we are going to turn things backwards a little bit and not have quite as high of expectations for a while. And this is getting a lot of criticism. I don't know how you feel about it. I've really done a lot of reading, and there's another part to it that is called declarative language. So with this low demand parenting, you should use declarative language, which doesn't say, go clean up your room. What you're saying is, I noticed there's a lot of things all over the floor. And then your child is supposed to somehow be like, I think I need to clean my room. And as you're listening to me right now, you might be like, Kerby, that's a bunch of malarkey. I'm not going to listen to that. But I will do another video about low demand parenting and about declarative language in the future. So stay tuned, watch for that one. Okay. And then finally, the last one I'm going to talk about right now is just permissive parenting. Low demand parenting and permissive parenting aren't the same thing. Permissive parenting is, I just am going to remove expectations, or I just don't care. I'm not going to enforce expectations, or I'm just going to do this with you. There's nobody really in charge. And children really don't feel safe when they're in a situation where nobody's in charge. And with low demand parenting, no one's taking that away. The parent is still in charge and has the final word. They're still very much there and present. Okay, we're permissive parenting, the parent might not be quite as present. So let's talk about this just for a little bit. Let's talk about pathological demand avoidance. I do like to focus on neurodevelopmental disorders, ADHD, and autism. So pathological demand avoidance, PDA, is what it's often referred to. And some folks, including myself, like the acronym PDA to stand for persistent drive for autonomy. The reason why I really like that term instead of pathological demand avoidance is pathological is just a terrible word in my opinion, But this persistent drive for autonomy really does get at the heart of what it's about. Children with PDA really do have this drive for autonomy. And when control is taken away, the opposite of autonomy, all right, then they feel unsafe. Now, it's hard to explain exactly why. This is part of why it's a disorder. This is part of why we're talking to mental health professionals about this, because it's not necessarily what you would want. All right. So PDA was first discovered by a psychologist in the UK, and her name was Elizabeth Newsom, all right, in the 1980s. And she noticed that some children had a unique autism profile where everyday, regular demands that children are expected to do triggered intense anxiety. Not defiance, not opposition, but intense anxiety. They would just fold in. It became very overwhelming. Their nervous system was overwhelmed, and they were reacting as if the demands placed upon them were dangerous, were unsafe. Clean your room, you know. And a lot of families, might be, a lot of caregivers might be watching this saying, well, that's what our son does, or that's what our daughter does. Hearing the word no is something that might, and that takes away the autonomy that the child craves so dearly and feels unsafe. Is it because they're spoiled? You're going to give them what they want? Well, you might institute some sort of low demand parenting strategies that might look like you're giving them what they want. And for a little while, you might be. And it may be confusing to other people. And guess what? They're not raising your kid, you are. So, whatever. I don't like it when people give advice when they haven't walked in the shoes. But so today we're going to learn more about how this profile shows up in children and some things families do that have been helpful that maybe you've been searching for as well. So we'll talk a little bit more here about ADHD and PDA. So next, let's talk about ADHD. ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. There's the inattentive type, and there's the hyperactivity type, and there's the combined type. Some folks are believing that maybe it's being overdiagnosed. Some folks are saying, gosh, everyone's got ADHD, or even friends I've known for years are suddenly saying, I have ADHD. And if I were asked, is it being overdiagnosed? Is it being overdiagnosed? I would actually say I'm not sure. I don't know. I know that for my entire life, I thought that there was something wrong with me. I couldn't focus. For way back when I was younger, I was like, I don't think I'm as smart as everyone else. And I truly, truly, truly believe that. Actually, I still believe that today, especially when I'm not feeling great. And however, I have been doing some professional stuff. I went to college. I got a couple degrees. I actually teach at a university, a kind of nice university, I think, right? Go Hawkeyes. But so I might be smart. Maybe it wasn't my intelligence. Perhaps it was my inability to focus and pay attention back in the 1980s in these classrooms in Forest City, Iowa, where they didn't know anything about ADHD because no one had invented it yet, because I'm just that old. But now, after I've been learning more about these things, I was like, this is something I've got. Are you kidding me? Like, folks are able to sit still and just clunk through a list of tasks and just check these boxes and get stuff done. I want to experience what that feels like. And so I went through the process of getting assessed, and lo and behold, I passed the test, and I do have that diagnosis, and now I have a medication, and when I take it, I'm able to sit at my desk and stay focused and get things done. And it's kind of amazing. Like, I just had no idea. Like, why couldn't someone have diagnosed me earlier and said, here you go with this great tool? I think that would have been fantastic. So why would we want to deny someone else that possibility? So whenever I'm thinking about ADHD, I think about that. I think, okay, I do have opinions about medication, stimulant, non-stimulant, what's best. That's where all of us are designed so differently. Our bodies are different. And so I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I know what I take and I know it works for me. Um, and I know that it's not as much of a science as it is an art sometimes. I mean, there are these gene site tests you can take to say this one will work and this one won't. I don't know. I do think to some degree you just have to take the medication and see if it helps. And if it doesn't, don't keep taking it, after a certain period of time of letting it trial anyway. But um, but not everyone with ADHD is the same. There's so much out there. There's so many different examples and so many stories. And if we can get off of me and talk about children and families again, when we get back to social media and go to some of these ADHD parent support groups and so forth, you'll see the advice. And if you read the comments, it's a lot of like, well, with my child, we did this. And with my child, this is what worked. Or here's what you need to do. Or, oh, you need to. And just be cautious with some of those. All right. Now, when you come here to Secured Connections, when you come here to Securely Connected and ask questions in the chat, and future videos I do, I will continue. You'll continually hear me talk about this concept right here: rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria. I'll say it again: rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria. It is a diagnosis that's not in the DSM, but it's something that I've really read a lot about, and I think this is key. This is very important. Rejection sensitivity is when a child's brain experiences correction, disappointment. They perceive some sort of criticism or some sort of sign of non-acceptance as a really horrible, horrible thing. Okay, so I believe it's associated with the ambivalent attachment type, and I believe that children who have attachment disruptions and who have ADHD are more likely to experience the symptoms of rejection sensitivity dysphoria. All right. So what you'll see this in is when kids lie and when they steal. So crazy lying and crazy stealing. Crazy lying when there's no way that this happened, and they just will not back down. Or when they steal something and they're caught red-handed and they still completely deny that they stole it, and you're like, there's no other way. That's likely because they're experiencing rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and they're afraid they're going to be abandoned. So that fear of abandonment is really real, and it's huge, and it feels like an amazingly large anxiety. And so we just want to remember that when we're providing care, because what do they need in that moment? Do they need someone who's coming down harsh on them, someone who's criticizing them, or someone who's going to address the rejection sensitivity dysphoria? All right. So it's subconscious to a point. It's very much impulsive. And when they do the crazy lying or crazy stealing, it's more like they got into it, they did this, boom, it happened. And then they thought, because of the executive functioning problems that are going on, they will act before they think about it. They're like, oh my gosh, I got to get out of this somehow. So what's my lie? What's my story going to be? And they immediately begin focusing all of their attention, hyper-focusing on the story, on this made-up narrative that's going to get them out of trouble, they feel. And they're not thinking about reality. They're not thinking about how actually their caregiver loves them and isn't going to criticize them. They're not thinking about that. Their mind just gets hyper-focused on this narrative. And when you don't believe the narrative, it's incredibly frustrating. So the only way to address this is to address it for what it really is: rejection sensitivity dysphoria. There's a reason this happens to you. It's because you've had these experiences in your life, and your brain automatically thinks that you're in danger, and you're not, because we love you. So you don't have to come up with these stories. You don't have to do all that. Isn't that exhausting anyway? So when we understand this, our responses can change, and the way we provide care changes, and their behavior can change too. So at Secure Connection from Wellness, we look at children through the lens of attachment and regulation first. Co-regulation with the caregiver is super important. And one example is children who have anxiety. They're not necessarily choosing anxiety. It's not willful disobedience. It's their brain telling them that something's not safe. When children have explosive behaviors and meltdown, and are really, really, really upset about something that seems moderately benign, it really very likely is not willful disobedience. It's likely an overwhelmed nervous system that's misinterpreting what's happening as unsafe, even if they are safe. So the sense of felt safety is the concept that we need to be repeating to ourselves over and over. Is this willful disobedience, or is this an example of someone experiencing a safe situation as unsafe? So with years of experience in mental health practice, with years of parenting my own children who had plenty of struggles, and my years of teaching, I try to offer families practical and realistic ideas that are embedded in compassion and are usable in everyday life. I say over and over, this is easier said than done, but I'll stand by it and say the more you practice, the easier it gets. Don't stop using the internet to find parenting support. I'm not saying that either. There are many wonderful voices out there. Just remember to consider the source. Ask questions. Look for guidance that strengthens understanding and connection and addresses the sense of felt safety and addressing that need, that function of the behavior. And if you have further questions about what you're hearing and seeing on the internet, I would like to take a look at it with you. Drop a comment in the, below this video. And just remember, a strong connection and a regulated nervous system is where change begins. So go ahead and leave a like, please subscribe, and put a question down below if you have one about anything that I may have covered in this video or that you'd like to see me cover in future videos. I'd like to know. If you're parenting a child who throws you a few curveballs or challenges in ways that you never imagined, let me know. I'll keep posting videos, so come back and check again. All right, until next time, I'm Kerby Hansen, and you've been watching Securely Connected. Come see me sometime out here if you'd like at Secured Connections and Wellness, where I'm a therapist who specializes in working with kids and families in times of struggle and times of, when things get kind of hard. I truly do enjoy learning what's going on and seeing if there's ways that I can help families decide what their next steps might be in a creative, kind of fun way. So until next time, please take care, be kind to everybody, and please be kind to yourself. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.